Hey everyone, welcome to Culture Binge, where we feast on the zeitgeist and tell you about what a mistake it was to do that. For everyone watching live, thanks for joining in. I'm here with Wisecrack researcher Serby. Hey Serby.
Hi.
We've got Culture Binge regular. He's a regular at this point. He's a Wisecrack writer and host. He's Silver Lake's sweatiest, also known as Dr. Do. It's Michael Burns, PhD.
Yeah, it's in the 70s and I still wore shorts to stay cool on my way here.
Aww. And then my name is Alec. I run the writing team with Jared. We're all on Twitter. You can find us somehow. Or don't. That's cool too. I'm really excited about this week. We've got a lot of cool stuff to talk about. As many of you know, Blink-182 frontman Tom DeLonge showed us them aliens. Leaked footage of UFOs have been plastered all over the internet, with the Navy even confirming that the footage is real. But is it all it's cracked up to be? Then after that, after that, Serby is going to talk about the unknown known dangers of medications. Don't even know what that means, but I'm very excited to find out. And Michael is going to try to answer the eternal question, should we all stop having babies? But before we continue, he looks very surprised that I said that. But anyway, but before we continue, it's time to figure out what's going on this week that we love and hate, the terribly named Slaps and Chaps. I think I'll go first this time. Sorry, for everyone watching, I'll just center myself. There we go. As I've said before, I've been trying to listen to new music instead of listening to the same 80 things over and over again. And Fela Kuti, it's like a Afrobeat, like huge orchestra. It's awesome. Everyone should go listen to it. He's old and or dead. I'm not quite sure. But I've been listening to it all day and it's awesome. And then for what chaps is, I got my flu shot and they didn't give me a sticker. So I'm bitter and I want my money back. I didn't pay any money. It was free. What about you, Serby?
So a few weeks ago, so what slaps is that a few weeks ago, I talked about how I wanted to have a better work-life balance. And I think I'm making progress.
Hooray.
I'm working out a lot. I'm trying to decrease stress by doing mindfulness. And I tried acupuncture recently. And then in terms of work, I've been trying to unplug over the weekend. So not checking email, Slack, Telegram, or anything like that. It's really hard, but I'm really trying to do that, and I'm proud of my progress. And then what chaps is that I'm on my last episode of Jane the Virgin, and I'm really, really sad. It's such a wholesome, family-oriented show, and I just feel like I don't know what other show will fill that void now. So if anybody has any recommendations for happy shows, please let me know.
Oh, you could watch Seventh Heaven reruns. That was a wholesome family show from the early 2000s. You're welcome.
I'm going to hard pass on that one. I heard that the dad in Seventh Heaven was not super family-oriented or wholesome in real life.
The actor wasn't, but the dad himself was a really cool minister that definitely wasn't a...
I know, but I can't separate it. Like every time I see him, I'm going to think that he's a chomo, and I don't know that I can do that.
Sorry that I brought this up.
What about you, Burns?
Oh, what slaps? I've been really excited for the last 5 to 6 weeks about the premiere of ABC's Stumptown.
You've been tweeting about it, but I thought it was all ironic.
It was half ironic, but I wanted it to be good because it's a sort of comedic crime drama that features two of my favorite TV actors, Jake Johnson and Kobe Smulders, and it was fun. It was like a fun premiere. The second episode is going to air tonight, and I think we live in this era of all this like prestige television, so you can bounce from watching Fleabag to Righteous Gemstones to what happened in Succession this week, but there's not a lot of like dumb fun shows, and it seemed thus far like a show that knows that it's dumb and fun, which I like. So I'm excited about that as a way to turn my mind off and watch something. What chaps, this is kind of a general thing, but it chaps when people think that the job you do is an intuitive thing that anyone is capable of doing.
I've had that so many times. I love it.
Yeah.
I hate it. I love to hate it.
Yeah. So like anyone, and I think this is true for any job. Like you could be a great restaurant chef and someone will be like, no, this is how you cut a carrot. Or if you're like a writer, anyone thinks they have access to language. And I remember when I was more of a philosopher. I use finger quotes for everyone listening properly.
He has a PhD.
Yeah, but people like family dinners would come up and put their arm around me and be like, "Oh, philosophy. Well, it's basically just your opinions on stuff. Let me tell you my philosophy." And I'd be like, "This is not how it works." But I don't know. For anyone who that is happening to, that sucks. I feel for you. And if you're someone who does that, be more cognizant about it and stop and respect people for their expertise and their skills.
I thought you were going to go just quickly. The other side of this is I've worked for people. I used to do. I won't even say what it is. I had a boss who was like, "Can you just teach everything you know about this job you've been doing for 2 years to this other person in like an hour?"
Sucks.
And the answer is no. And they're like, "But you could try. Like you get like 80% of it, right?" It's like, no. I've spent the last 2 years mastering this job, and I've gotten kind of good at it. Obviously, I have much more to do. Yeah.
Was that when you were a pilot?
When I was, yeah.
When we got a new guy.
Well, I think that's a good segue because I'm sure something that takes lots of time to become good at is debunking UFO stuff. So to set this up a little bit, we have a very special guest today, Mick West. He is the creator of metabunk.org, which debunks a lot of conspiracy theories. I actually, we did a flat earth video that I wrote. I used it a ton in sort of researching flat earth and why it's wrong, because I just wanted to be extra double sure that it was wrong before I was saying it was wrong. And spoiler, it's not correct. But anyway, we have him not only to thank for metabug.org, but the existence of Tony Hawk Pro Skater games, kind of, maybe.
What?
Yeah, here he is, Mick West.
Hey, how you doing?
Yeah, so sorry, this is just a fun aside, but you founded a software company that made Tony Hawk's Pro Skaters and other cool games, right?
I did. I was one of the co-founders, one of 3 co-founders of Neversoft, who did the Tony Hawk series of video games, and I was the lead programmer on the first 5 iterations. So whenever you press your buttons to do a kickflip, that's me behind the screens there.
Teenage me thanks you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Most of my experience with that game is the dentist office had it, so I would wait. And I really hated the dentist, but I really liked playing Tony Hawk in the office, so thank you. But anyway, so here's what's going on for anyone who's unaware. This is from a Vice article, and I'm actually going to copy and paste that in the chat real quick. So from the Vice article, in 2017 and 2018, 3 videos taken by Navy pilots from their 3 videos taken by Navy pilots from their aircraft made national news. In December 2017, the New York Times ran a story about Navy pilots who intercepted a strange object off the coast of San Diego on November 14th, 2004, and managed to shoot video of the object with their F-18's gun camera. Another video was taken on January 21st, 2015, shows another anomalous aerial vehicle rotating as pilots comment on how strange the object is over their communication system. Months later, Tom DeLonge, former Blink-182 frontman, through his organization To the Stars Academy, released a 3rd video showing an object quickly flying over the surface of the water. In official statements, the U.S. Navy for the first time officially stated that the 3 UFO videos made public by Tom DeLonge are footage of real unknown objects violating American airspace. So I think our first question, Mick, who has wonderful videos on these, if people want to check them out a little bit later, what's going on?
What's going on? Well, let's start with that in reverse order. You've got like the Navy saying that these are real videos of unknown objects. What that really means is they're real videos of objects that are too far away to see what they actually are. It doesn't mean that there are some kind of UFO or something, some kind of flying saucer, because you can't actually see anything about the shape of them. And the most famous one is the one that goes on with this Nimitz encounter from 2004. They call it the Nimitz video or the Fleur video. And all you see is this fuzzy little dot, way off in the distance, and it hardly moves at all. And they keep changing the camera, which makes it look like it moves, but it never really moves. Then the other 2 videos, again, all you're seeing essentially is kind of a blob, with the one that looks like it's going fast. If you actually do the math, it isn't actually going very fast. And the one that looks like it's rotating, if you actually kind of analyze what's going on and you realize that what you're seeing isn't in the object itself, it's actually kind of almost like a light effect. It's like the glare rotating around the object. they become much less mysterious. So you've got 3 videos that actually do, when you look into it, have reasonable explanations for basically things that are too far away to see what they are. And then you combine it with all these stories that people are telling, and it kind of grows into something much more than it actually is.
Yeah, and we've got some video we're going to put up on the live stream. This is from Tom DeLonge's To the Stars Academy. But it looks, I mean, as a person not trained in science and certainly who's horrible at math, I mean, it looks like a small object that's going really fast. I've even seen, different videos at various points of people being like, that's going so fast, it couldn't possibly be a drone or another aircraft. And so here we have, and what we're seeing is it's over the water. There's a little white dot that just sort of zooms by, and the camera is trying to sort of track on it. I think it's like the automated camera from the plane. And then they lock onto it. And yeah, it just looks really fast and really mysterious. And it seems like the speed is a common argument, right? That this can't be a balloon or something, right? But we had talked a little bit earlier. You said that logic doesn't quite add up.
Sure, yeah, and it does look like it's going really, really fast. You can see it zipping across, but it's kind of a function of the type of camera they're using. It's a camera that's designed to track things, so it focuses in like on one thing very, very precisely. There's a real simple experiment you can do to kind of demonstrate this. If you just hold your hand out in front of you with your thumb up and close one eye, and then you move your head to the left or to the right, you'll see your thumb appears to move in the opposite direction relative to the background. So if you've got something that's halfway between you and the background, which in this case is the water, and the jet is moving, because of course the jet is flying along at 300 miles an hour, then it's going to look like this object is moving at 300 miles per hour, even if it wasn't moving. If it was just a balloon hovering in space and not moving at all, it would actually look like it was moving at 300 miles an hour, just because of this effect, the parallax effect.
And in some of your videos, you've actually done the math of saying, the camera says it's this far away, and we can do some, I guess it's trigonometry, maybe?
Yeah.
Again, I'm not the math expert. And so you've actually figured out, in some of these cases, we can have a pretty good guess of how fast it was going, and it wasn't anything particularly extraordinary.
Yeah. With the Go Fast video, that's actually pretty much the simplest trig you can ever do, like you will learn at school. You learn that sine equals opposite over hypotenuse. This is the first thing you learn when you do a trig. And this is what you actually use to figure out how high the object is, which gives you a good idea of kind of how fast it needs to be moving. So it's actually not very, very complicated. And it's kind of suspicious, really, that the people who put out this video, Tom DeLonge and his crew, never actually did this math. They just stuck it out and said, look at this thing moving really fast over the water. It's incredible. It's moving 2/3 the speed of sound, when it wasn't. And if you do the trig, which is really, really simple, high school trig, then they would have figured that out. But for some reason, they kind of skipped over that step.
And even just the name UFO, unidentified flying object, I think there's a new acronym, unidentified aerial object, or what's the
aerial
new one?
Phenomenon. Yeah, it's unidentified aerial phenomenon. And that's basically just to kind of encompass things like lights and whatnot. Like if you see a glowing light in the sky, you don't know what it is. It might not be an object. It could be Venus. Or it could be like you're seeing a reflection through a window, or it could be like lens glare or something in the camera. So they call them phenomena just so they include all these things, and they're not necessarily implying that it must be an object. It could just be a light.
And so is the Navy saying, like, listen, this could be a balloon or a drone, but we actually don't know. Maybe it's a jet from another country that's gone into our airspace, and because we don't know, that's why we have to figure it out?
Sure, yeah. I mean, it could be a drone that's in their airspace that they don't know what it is. It could just be somebody flying their own drone, probably unlikely out in the ocean, or it could just be a stray balloon, or it could be some kind of enemy device, like trying to get information. So if they don't know what it is, they're kind of duty bound to figure out what it is. So obviously they're going to investigate it. I mean, it's kind of silly to say the Navy wouldn't investigate UFOs, because if a UFO flew into the middle of a battle fleet, or a whole bunch of them flew in there, obviously they're going to try to figure out what it was. So yeah, of course the Navy investigates UFOs.
Are you like super confident? So what's your relation to aliens, in the sense that, like, it's one thing to say, listen, we don't have scientific proof here. Are you agnostic about the issue? Do you not think there are, aliens at all? Or what's your take on it?
Well, I definitely think there's aliens somewhere in the universe because the universe is so incredibly large, and there's billions and trillions of planets everywhere. But are they here? What evidence do we have that they're here? If they are here, I think why would they be hiding and zipping around? It doesn't really make any sense. And why do they appear in about 5,000 different forms? If you look at the UFO sightings, they're all different. People talk about we see flying saucers, but you see all kinds of shapes. You see triangles, you see sausage-shaped things. They move fast, they move slow, they disappear, they teleport. They have flashing lights, which quite often look like the lights of airplanes. So you get all these different things. So what's happened? There's 25,000 different alien civilizations all visited us at once, or do they just change shape all the time? So the evidence really doesn't indicate to me that there actually are alien visitors. I know a lot of people will disagree with that, but I haven't really seen any convincing evidence. I mean, for one, all the video you see of things like this, it's always things that are just too far away to make out what they are. And I'm pretty sure that in pretty much every case there, if you just had a better zoom lens and you zoomed in a bit more, you'd be able to tell what it was. It's like a bird, or it's a plane, or it's a paper bag blowing in the wind.
And there's one specific case you talk about where it was I don't think it was one of these 3 videos. There was an unidentified object, and more or less the internet crowdsourced it and figured out it was a plane, and there was a flight path for it and everything like that. Was this something that the military was unaware? How did they not cross-check that?
This was a thing in Chile. So it was
okay.
the Chilean Navy Force. What happened was a helicopter was patrolling the coast looking for drug smugglers or whatever with a new infrared camera, and then they saw something off in the distance which they thought was like a plane moving in one direction. So they trained the cameras on it, and they saw it for a while and recorded all this video, and they couldn't figure out what it was. Then they eventually lost sight of it. And the Chilean Navy have this little mini department that actually looks into UFOs, and they spent 2 years trying to analyze this video to figure out what it was, and they eventually said, "Oh, this is a genuine UFO that we don't know what it is. We've eliminated all the possibilities. It's not not a plane, not a bird, or whatever." And so they released the video, and there was this big story in the New York Times by Leslie Kean, who was saying, "This is the most incredible thing ever. This is the first genuine, verified government UFO." And so me and a bunch of other people started looking at this thing, and we looked at what's in the area, and we saw there was radar tracks of some planes. And then if you stick them into a 3D program like Google Earth, you can actually move the viewpoints, and you can see that this plane was in exactly the same spot as the UFO was, which meant that was what the UFO actually was. And the things that it looked like it was squirting out some stuff out of the back of it, but it turns out that was just a contrail. It was just the plane making a contrail. It was just climbing out of the area. So we proved in about 5 days, I think, that it was a plane, and the government, the government agency, wasn't able to do that. That's the Chilean government. Maybe it's a bit better in the US government, but I don't know if To the Stars Academy are the ones that you're relying upon to give you UFO information. Are they any better than the Chilean government?
What's it like sort of interacting with the UFO community? At least it seems to me, as someone who hasn't, the conspiracy theories I've dealt with are flat earthers, where it seems like no amount of evidence would ever change their view. Something about UFOs to me have always seemed at least more reasonable. There's probably aliens out there. What is this thing? I legitimately don't know. And hearing you talk about it, obviously, is okay. Well, that seems like it wasn't a UFO. But is the community pretty open to skepticism and criticism, or are they kind of as dogmatic as a flat earther or something like that? What's your experience with that?
Well, it's a kind of combination of ththings, because they like to think that they're very scientific. So they will actually accept good evidence. If something's absolutely proved, like this Chilean case, more or less, 95% of them will accept that it's this plane. There's still a whole bunch of holdouts, just because I guess they haven't really looked into it deeply enough, because it's a little bit complicated. But a lot of them get very, very passionate about it. They get very angry when I try to explain, what things might be. Say this go fast thing isn't actually going that fast. They get angry, and they say, well, you haven't disproven everything else. And I think the reason that they get angry is that a lot of them have had some kind of personal experience with UFOs, that they think that they themselves have seen a UFO, and that's why they believe in UFOs.
I see.
And so if they see me trying to debunk UFOs, they think I'm trying to debunk everything and calling them crazy, essentially. So
Right.
if I debunk one thing, it might debunk their thing. So it's encroaching upon their beliefs. It's almost like if there was a religious person and I debunked something like, I don't know, the virgin birth of Jesus. Does that invalidate all of Christianity? Yeah, in the minds of some Christians, yes, but in some Christians, no. So some of them are going to get angry at me, and some of them are not going to get angry at me.
And you wrote a whole book about how to engage with conspiracy theories and kind of engage with them respectfully. Like, what's the takeaway there?
Yeah, it's really important to not have people get angry at you. So you have to be very careful about what you say, but you've also got to try to develop an understanding of where they're coming from. Figure out why they believe in what they believe in. So you don't want to start in wading in, debunking everything that they believe and just mocking it and saying that it's silly and telling them to do more research. You got to start out just by talking to them, trying to understand why they believe what they believe. Try to understand what they think about you, because a lot of the times they might think that you're pretty stupid, or that you don't understand things, or that you don't have the knowledge that they do, which may be true. So you've got to start out just building this understanding and then kind of work gradually from there, and at all steps try to avoid them getting angry at you.
Wow. I don't think I have that skill of not letting people get angry at me, but do you guys have anything to add? Serby Mike?
Just a random question, I guess. With the UFO stuff, is it basically the case at this point that on the one hand you have the Tom DeLonges of the world who are just looking for like a proof text for something they already completely believe to be true, and then on the other side, those who are sort of actively debunking? And by that I mean, it kind of feels like with all the UFO stuff I've heard about, it's either those operating with a primary assumption that they definitely do exist and we must prove it, or those who are not purely, but primarily operating to like debunk those types. So are there any like research institutions out there that are not funded by punk rock guitar players that are, I don't know, like looking at stuff like this without knowing their conclusion from the get-go?
Not really, no. I mean, there's SETI, which is the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, but they're mostly looking at things like in other solar systems that are listening for radio signals. They don't expect to find anything nearby. So I'm not really aware of any like serious scientific bodies who are looking into it. There's quite a lot of individuals who will call themselves scientists who say they are looking into it, but they're just kind of doing the same type of thing, like looking at videos and kind of measuring angles and things like that. It does appear to be just kind of UFO believers and UFO debunkers, but I think that's just the ones you hear about on the internet. Yeah. There's obviously a huge range of people who are just either interested in it to one degree or another, or a lot of people give it credence. If you look at public opinion polls, it's something like 2/3 of people have suspicions about UFOs. And only like 1/3 of people will say there are no UFOs. So it's not like it's this kind of major fringe thing. It's just something that most people are just it's like ghosts, or it's like whatever it is. Like they know that lots of people believe it, and maybe it's true, maybe not. So a lot of people, I think, they just they view it almost as entertainment, really.
So you mentioned earlier that, and I agree with this assessment, that you don't believe that we've had alien visitors. So if we did, would you be concerned about that given the advanced technology that they'd have to create in order to get to us? Is that something that you would be concerned about?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you have no idea whatsoever what these alien visitors are going to do. I mean, you've probably seen things like Star Trek, and there's like one set of aliens called the Borg, which is just this big computer entity, and that's a possible thing that might come visit us. Like robots will probably be a lot better at colonizing the galaxy than humans will, and they might not care too much for biological life. So if there were actually alien visitors, it could be dangerous. Or they could be some kind of, really cool alien race who want to share all their technology with us and bring peace to the world. You don't know what you're going to get with aliens, and it's a bit of a risk. You think back to like things like the Aztec Empire when they encountered the Spanish civilization. That didn't go very well for the Aztecs, did it?
Yeah. I was actually talking to someone about the golden disc that are on Voyager. Carl Sagan and some other scientists put like a testament to what humanity is about, but I guess they made a conscious choice to omit all the bad stuff like the war and the slavery and all that stuff. And we were just kind of having a conversation like, oh, like we're kind of lying to aliens, but for my own self-preservation, I feel like they would read that stuff. If it were true, they would read that and be like, oh, we definitely need to exterminate these humans. But anyway, Mick West, thank you so much.
Thank you.
People can find your website, metabunk.org. What else do you want to plug? Your Twitter, your book?
Oh yeah, I'm on Twitter at Mick West, and my book is Escaping the Rabbit Hole. It's got this nice hypnotizing cover.
Cool.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you,
All
Nick.
right, thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. That was so interesting.
That was awesome.
All right. Before we go on. All right. So before we get into Serby's topic, I want to let you know for the first time ever, Skillshare. Sorry, I said that wrong. I wanted to let you know that Culture Binge is brought to you by Skillshare, is what I meant to say. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of amazing classes covering dozens of creative and entrepreneurial skills. You can take classes in everything from photography and creative writing to design, productivity, and more. So whether you're returning to a longtime passion project, challenging yourself to get outside your comfort zone, or simply exploring something new, Skillshare has classes for you. Sorry, give me 1 second. For those of you who don't know, my job at Wisecrack is running the writing team with Jared. I said that earlier. It's not hosting podcast, but I'm constantly trying to be a better editor, mostly so Michael doesn't think that I'm bad at my job and secretly judges me. But anyway, that's why Skillshare is great. It's never too late to keep improving. I personally recommend I took the creative nonfiction Write Truth with Style with Susan Orlean. She is a staff writer at The New Yorker and author of a bunch of books, so definitely knows what she's doing. But the class really helped me think through writing video essays and also some of the articles we're writing on Medium. And it's just really helpful to see how other writers think and work, how they organize their research, how they pick a subject, all that stuff. And so a class like that is super, super valuable to somebody but like me, or, if you're maybe trying to start your writing career. But even if you don't want to be a writer, tons of great stuff. You can join the millions of students already learning on Wow, I cannot speak today. You can join the millions of students already learning on Skillshare today with special offer just for Culture Binge listeners. You can get 2 months free. That's right, Skillshare is offering you 2 months of unlimited access to thousands of classes for free. To sign up, go to Skillshare.com/culturebinge. Again, Skillshare.com/culturebinge to start your 2 months free now. One more time, Skillshare.com/culturebinge. Anyway. Thank you all so much. Serby, you want to talk about something? A skin whitening cream that's killing people?
I do want to talk about that. But before I talk about that, that's super cool about Skillshare because I've been looking into ways to up-level skills at work. And sometimes it's hard to find like a reputable place. And I'm like, if I'm going to give money somewhere, like how do I know if I'm actually going to learn something? So I'm going to take advantage of that if I can.
Maybe you use the promo code.
I am going to use the promo code for sure. Okay, cool. So I'm going to talk about bad medicine. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is that I've been reading a lot in the news about medications being pulled from the shelves or like severe warning labels or severe warnings being issued. And I've been also reading a lot about the opioid crisis here in the States. And this is a 2-part discussion, and I'll ask you the question, then I'll provide the example. So here's the first question. Do we rely too heavily on doctors and the expert opinion and stop engaging in due diligence before we take medication? So here's my example. Last week, I read on the BBC that skin lightening creams should be avoided at all costs. And this is from the article. Because hydroquinone, the skin lightening agent, is the biological equivalent of paint stripper. It can remove the top layer of skin, increase the risk of skin cancer, and cause fatal liver and kidney damage. And hydroquinone is banned in the United Kingdom, but over here in the States, we're selling it over the counter with a very mild warning label.
Here's a question. Are doctors prescribing that though?
So it's not prescribed, but doctors have recommended it to patients. And
But
What would
why would a doctor be like, hey, you want to make your skin whiter?
so let me give you an example.
Okay, sure. Yeah. I'm all ears.
I know about this because a few years ago, a business school classmate got drunk and pushed me into a chain link fence, and it resulted in a pretty deep cut on my arm.
Jesus.
Yeah, he's a real asshole. I'm looking at you, Oren. If you're listening, you're the worst. So I was at the doctor for unrelated reasons, and she asked me about the scratch on my arm, and I told her, and then I expressed unhappiness at the prospect of it scarring, and she said, oh, well, if it scars, just use hydroquinone to lighten the scar. And I was like, oh, okay. So I used it, lightened my scar, and over the years, I've used hydroquinone whenever I've had a scar resulting from like an insect bite or a scratch or something like a cut. And I had no idea that it caused all of these issues. And I looked at the bottle, and the warning label just says it's not designed for prolonged use, I think is all it says. And the reason why I bring this up is that if I had just done a simple search on hydroquinone, I would have realized how dangerous it was to use it. And I've talked with friends, and they've also mentioned that they've been prescribed medication. They took it without thinking, and only afterwards they realized that there were serious side effects. So again, my question is, do we rely too heavily on doctors and the expert opinion and stop thinking for ourselves before we take medication?
Go ahead.
Oh, well, I just wanted, like, on the flip side of that, though, I think I want to say yes to your initial question, but here's all I'd say to that. There's medications I've taken before where you Google them, and you'll find 80 people on Reddit who talk about how taking whatever medication ruined their life, almost killed them, made an eyeball fall out or something. So I think, like, it is true that maybe we rely too much on doctors, but if the move is that we got to research stuff for ourselves, then it's hard to differentiate between things that are genuinely dangerous or, I don't know, the one person out of a million that had a crazy reaction or something.
Yeah, I think it's weirdly complicated. I'm actually reading a lot of books about, not a lot, I'm reading 2 books on the history of vaccines right now. And a similar issue came up in the 60s where like the women's rights movement was like, doctors are fucking us over. They're lying to us. They're not telling us side effects, all this stuff. And like, even outside that context, it like can happen, right? And so on one end, doctors may not, there's kind of this very paternalistic attitude often that is like, I know what's best, take this drug, you don't really need to know what the possible side effects are, like, and all that stuff. There's all kinds of other issues, like doctors don't necessarily always take the concern seriously of certain kinds of patients and all this other shit. On the other hand, the response to that can often be so much worse, because the reason I'm reading about the history of vaccines is because anti-vaxxers exist, where they're like, the doctors are lying to me about the dangers of the polio vaccine, so I guess I'll just maybe let my kid get polio because mothers know best. And it's tricky. And like, I often try to do my own research, like when I get drugs or possibly a procedure, I like to read about the risk and be a hypochondriac, which is another complicating factor. I'll read about my symptoms, and every time I'm just convinced that I have cancer. And so like already me, who somewhat scientifically literate, like I think I think I have a good sense of what I know and don't know about science, so that I could like go through and like parse out what a research paper means. But I know lots of other people who do their own research. Someone in my family, I won't name specifics, was like, oh, this person has leukemia because of Adderall, and they never had ADHD to begin with. I've done my research. It's a phrase that comes up a lot in my family. Also told me not to get my cat vaccinated because they've done the research and causes liver damage. I haven't done the research on that. Pretty sure it's not true. And also my cat could die from so many communicable diseases in New York, whatever. So I think it's really tricky, and I'm really interested in this question of like, how do we balance the bad side of like doctor paternalism and sort of giving patients kind of like agency and decision making in a way that isn't just like anti-science. And specifically about the skin whitening, I wonder, like, it's almost like I'm a doc. Like my doctor told me to buy Nike shoes because my feet were fucked up. But like it's not like he read a medical paper and was like, yeah, Nikes are great. He's just like, yeah, whatever. And like I bet the same thing for the scar. It's not like it's gone through safety testing through the FDA and this is a drug prescribed for all these things. He's just like, oh yeah, I know people use this and like whatever, or she or whatever. But yeah, I don't know. That might have been rambly.
So I think it depends on one's upbringing and culture in terms of whether or not they rely too heavily on doctors' opinions. I read this book. I can't remember if it was something by Malcolm Gladwell or Nickel and Dime by Barbara Ehrenreich or something. But it talked about how individuals from lower socioeconomic backgrounds are more likely to trust experts without thinking beyond what they're being told. And I was raised to always question everything, but I slip up when it's something over the counter because I think, oh, well, if it's generally available, like that's totally fine. But with something like hydroquinone, which is banned in other countries, but we sell it here in the States, it makes me start to think that, like, one, do we not have strict enough controls in terms of like drugs? And two, like, how do we prevent this? Like, it's like Michael said, if we do a search, there are so many side effects for things. So I don't really know like the answer. Like, how do we be active members in protecting our own health, but not at the risk of not taking medication that we need?
Yeah. I wonder if part of this too is just the problem with the way we treat science, especially in the West, as something that I think is almost akin to like magic sometimes. We look at doctors and like doctors are magicians that have the potions that make us feel better, rather than acknowledging that medicine is a science and like all sciences is constantly in process and various doctors are at different points of different levels of research. And of course, there's something, there's things that we're doing right now, whatever they might be, probably having our phones with us all the time, that might be killing us that we're not going to realize has been slowly killing us for 30 years. Or there's drugs that like we take for one thing that might be there for other things. So I think it's a weird societal attitude. And I think I fall into the category of people that think that doctors are magicians and I'll do anything they tell me no matter what. And even thinking back to the point you made about Nikes, Alec, there's that weird thing as well with doctors, right, where we like confuse authority. So a doctor can give me advice on a procedure that she's about to give me or whatever. The same doctor might say, oh, also you should eat cannellini beans as like an aside of something they're interested in. But my mind goes like, well, a doctor said it. Or if a doctor says like you should really watch the Downton Abbey movie, it like ties up the story real well. Well, a doctor liked it. So I think there's issues even how we perceive the medical sciences and doctors that tie into like issues of faith.
Yeah, and I think there's like the science of the drugs themselves, but I think the part where the most sort of like bias and like unscientific things comes in is like through the diagnostic process, right? Because like any human, they sort of have kind of, biases, right? It's like been well documented, for instance, that people will have conditions, whether it's cancer or like a rare hereditary disease, and doctors, if the person's overweight, they'll just be like, oh, lose some weight, you'll be fine. Not to mention like losing weight is like, if that is what needs to happen, is like incredibly like long process that it's very hard, and just like telling you that's probably not going to fix it. But the same thing like with women in the 60s, oftentimes symptoms would be attributed to like literally like being hysterical is what they would say, or they like give them a Valium and like not really tell them the side effects of a Valium. And I think that happens in like lots of different ways. And I think that's especially where I'm there. And I think there are movements to try to combat that, like in the science field. Like some doctors at some schools are kind of being aware of this. Also, there's like a community health movement. I don't really know where that fits in, but again, it's sort of like taking control of your health, like within a community and organizations and all that stuff, rather than kind of like this top-down thing. But yeah, I don't really know the solution. I'm wondering if I'd love for smart people on this topic to write in.
Yeah.
Yes, please do.
And this also just like makes you think, kind of off what you just said, random anecdote. But when I lived in the UK, I remember a couple times I got like cold or flu symptoms and went to my GP there thinking they would give me antibiotics because that's what you do. And they would always look at me like, no, like we'll give you antibiotics if you're about to die. But if you have a flu, take some time off work and get in bed and drink fluids. Because there was that genuine concern over the overprescription of antibiotics, where here it's just like if you sneeze in front of the right doctor, they're giving you a backpack full of the things.
Yeah. And also, even like the overprescription of drugs. And it's especially interesting with antidepressants because I think the majority of people are prescribed antidepressants not through like a psychiatrist, but their general practitioner. And like, in their rotations, they take the sort of psychiatric part and they understand generally how they work and the risk and all that stuff. But obviously depression is like a super complicated thing. And my doctor sees me for like 15 minutes. I could just imagine being like, I've been feeling kind of down. And without asking other questions, be like, great, here's some antidepressants, rather than probably what I should do would be like to see a therapist, then to talk to a psychiatrist, or in reverse order, and figure out like if I should take antidepressants for a certain period of time and then like do therapy and figure it out, or maybe I need to be on antidepressants all the time. And again, I think that's just another way that we're like, well, the doctor said it. Also, I've had issues where the doctor is just like, you're fine. And then I didn't come back. And then it got way worse. And I came back 6 months later. He's like, oh my God, why didn't you come back sooner? I was like, because you told me I was fine, you fucking asshole. Anyway.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
sorry, Sophie.
My second question is there an increasing tendency for medical professionals to recommend treatments that are disproportionate for a condition? So my next example, I have food allergies, and sometimes when I eat out at a restaurant, and if like something's cross-contaminated, I'll develop eczema. And I have a steroid cream that I put on the eczema and it goes away. But recently I had some eczema that wouldn't go away. So I went to a dermatologist and I told her, oh, is there like a higher prescription like strength you can give me? Or like, what do you recommend? Anything like alternative? And she's like, oh, I'll just give you this new prescription for a different eczema cream. So I got home and I'm reading through like the drug information, and in like gigantic warning signs, it says, caution, like severe danger with use, will cause lymphoma. And
what kind of use though?
What?
Yeah. So this cream causes lymphoma.
Why would they have a drug that causes lymphoma?
In how many people? Like 1 in a billion, or like
No, it's common. Like I looked it up because I was like, is this one of those things like may cause death? But it had like a separate warning, so it was like the drug information provided by the pharmaceutical company, but there was also like a separate pamphlet that was provided by my healthcare provider that said, do not use this cream longer than necessary. Use the smallest amount possible. This does cause lymphoma. Like there's a direct link. It's not even like potentially. It's
well, why do they make this and sell it if there's a direct link between lymphoma?
Is it for people whose eczema is so bad it's like ruining their life, you know?
So it
Some
could
guy
be for
said,
that.
I'd rather have cancer than this. And a pharmaceutical company was like, touche.
It's for people who have like severe skin conditions, and it's not even just for eczema. It could be like something else like psoriasis or other very severe conditions, or like I think infections and things like that. But I'm reading this and I'm like, I just have eczema. Like I don't need lymphoma. Like why did you prescribe this medication to me?
You don't know till you've tried it, to be honest.
True. That's
true.
Very true.
I used to think that I didn't like mushrooms and I had them prepared right, and now I love them.
Yeah, I shouldn't be closed-minded when it comes to lymphoma.
Yeah.
And I couldn't believe it though. Like the eczema wasn't even bad. Like it literally just needed like, instead of 0.01%, I probably just needed like 0.05 or something.
I would say that your doctor's bad. And there are bad, that's the other thing. There's like really good doctors and there's really bad doctors. And I don't think we're trained. I think maybe we should be trained to spot them, because oftentimes, like I've had conversations with the doctors I do like, who say like, listen, if you do this, here's the risk, here's the side effects. It may not even work, but if you don't do this, like, here's that. And so my job as the doctor is to like give you the information of like balancing out like kind of that risk and reward. And so there are people who have severe medical conditions. Like some people have Crohn's disease so badly that they have to get a bone marrow transplant, I've learned, which is like this very dangerous and like horrifying procedure. But like their Crohn's is so bad that they do it. And so like a doctor's not going to be like, oh, you get the shit sometimes. You want to get a bone marrow transplant? Because obviously the risk of doing damage to that person does not outweigh the sort of benefit of it. And like in your case, like they did not do that calculus right. But I think like a good doctor would say, you probably almost certainly don't need this. Here's a cream that causes lymphoma, but seriously, please don't take it.
Well, and then I wonder, in terms of like the level of relations, like maybe we have too much trust in doctors. How do doctors think about pharmaceuticals? Like what skepticism or research are they doing about drugs? Or are they like, oh, Merck or Pfizer made this, it must be good, not looking into how much money the company's making off of it, et cetera, et cetera. So like, I don't know, like when you get the fentanyl spray sent to you, is the doctor just like, oh, cool, a spray that relieves pain? Or is a doctor thinking, how is this a dangerous opiate-based substance that's causing problems and being sold at an insane profit, blah, 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 blah?
Yeah, I think, at least especially with opioids, they were getting a lot of information from the reps. And again, like I think good doctors probably get that information, do their own research. I used to work at a mental health practice where like some of the psychiatrists would like, they would read studies that came out and all this stuff. But yeah, everyone knows that psychiatrist you show and you're like, oh, I kind of can't pay attention. They're like, here's some Adderall, here's some Adderall, here's some, and like, they're probably not doing that research,
Yeah.
And so, I mean, all that information, to be fair, like is transparent. I'm sure there's regulations about how it has to be presented. Like, the drugs have to come with the insert about the risk and everything. But with opioids, it was that the reps would come in and say like, oh, it's not addictive at all, but like just give this out like candy. And now that family is declaring bankruptcy because they're so fucked. Anyway, I think we're running a little bit low on time, so I think we should move on to the next topic. Thank you so much for bringing that in, Serby. It's a really interesting topic. Lastly, babies. What's their deal, Michael Burns?
So the thing with babies is it's like a human, but small and dumb, and it poops its pants a lot. So it's like an old drunk, but a small non-linguistic animal. Okay, so there's this article, I think it came out a couple weeks ago by a gentleman named Tom Wyman, sort of philosopher and writer in the UK. And the title of the article is in the online publication, The Outline. Publication I like a lot when I like it a lot, but occasionally I hate. Someone out there understands what I just said. But the article is called, "It is Perfectly Moral to Bring Children into a Shitty World." And the article is riffing off the idea that because of various factors, whether it be the environment or political issues or thoughts about global scarcity, that that it's not morally right to have kids. Of course, anti-natalism is the general name for this position, that it is morally not good to reproduce. And I think two of the impetuses for the article that he gets at right off the bat, one is that Prince Harry and Meghan Markle of USA drama Suits have announced that they are only going to have 2 kids because they want to reduce their carbon footprint. I always look to the royal family for moral guidance, so I think that's great. And then he also brings up this organization or movement, although it says there's only 140 people in it, so I don't know if that's a movement, called Birth Strike. That's a group of people sort of claiming or sort of signing on to not bear children. So what struck me out of this article is I read it, and his initial argument is basically, okay, there's a lot of discussion these days about reasons we shouldn't have kids, and then he lets us know, spoiler alert, early on, but I just had one. And is sort of making the argument for why he is morally justifying creating a human. He didn't create it, his partner did. He was there for 30 seconds. Sorry, I just want to be fair. I had a grad school professor once that his wife got pregnant, and he said that the amount of energy it takes for a man to impregnate a woman is equivalent to the energy it takes to hard boil an egg. there was something else to it, but yeah. So he brings that up, but there was a huge response to this article on social media. A lot of people, especially like philosopher types and stuff, got really mad on the internet at this article.
Because they think we shouldn't have kids?
Because they think we should not have kids. And I found some extremely moralistic takes on this that would argue that having kids as such is bad. And there's political arguments, there's arguments about technology, there's arguments about the environment to be made for this. So I'm curious, in general, what do you all think about debates around anti-natalism and the morality of reproduction as we head into the deep 21st century?
So I am looking forward to having children. I very much want to be a mom, and I have thought about this a lot. Like, by bringing children into this world, like, is that contributing to the negative experience? And also, like, do I have a right to bring a child into a world that maybe isn't what I want it to be? So the reason why I still want to have children is that I see it as we can only, like, so I think of it this way. If I have children and I raise them to be compassionate, caring, empathetic individuals who care about the environment, who care about the people in the world around them, then maybe that can affect good change. And like, maybe they can like help future generations. And I don't think that like by having kids, like my carbon footprint is going to be any worse than it is now. I mean, I'm sure it will be, but I try to reduce plastic. I try to limit my water usage. I try to do a lot of other things to help the environment. And it's not enough for me to not want to have children, to miss out on that experience. I sort of see that more good can come from having kids, especially the way that I want to raise them. That, I don't know, maybe they'll invent something, or maybe they'll go clean up a beach or something one day. I think small things can have huge improvements in the future.
But what if they rebel and are like, I'm going to go set fires in the Amazon? I know.
I mean, yeah, I guess like there's always like a risk of like, if I have a kid and like I decide not to use those like reusable like cloth diapers and use like plastic diapers, like that does increase my plastic use and contribute to like environmental decay. But like I guess like I know how I am, and like I know that I want to do everything that I can do to help, but I don't want to miss out on not having children. And like maybe that's selfish, but it's really important to me to have kids. So I understand the debate, I understand the reasoning, and for a while I did like lean towards that way, but at the end of the day I want to be a mom.
Yeah, and that brings up the point too. It's like an ingrained part of human culture, grounded in like almost every religious tradition that I know anything about, the idea of family and reproduction. Sorry, Alec, you were about to talk.
I think if we want an alternate model of family, though, look no further than the Fast and Furious franchise. But I think about this a lot, not in terms of the environmental sense, but there was this guy, I think in India, who sued his parents for giving birth to him because he's like, I didn't ask for this. How dare you?
That guy's
and
awesome.
If a second person ever does this in the world, it would probably be my child. Like, I would just probably raise that kid who's like, I didn't ask to be born, Dad. I'm suing your ass.
100% that would be your kid.
And so, I mean, yeah, I for some videos I was reading about like pessimist philosophy, who are more or less, a lot of pessimists, Arthur Schopenhauer and some other people, who are more or less like, life isn't that great. Not like in a sad, like, I want to kill myself way, but just like in a, we treat it as like the end to like make more life and continue life. And they're, in a way that kind of overlaps with some forms of Buddhism, are like, no, life is suffering. And when you give birth to someone, you're more or less, without their permission, being like, congratulations, here's a big pile of suffering, have fun. Maybe you'll make a musical or something cool. And so I think about that a lot. Then again, like I like my life generally, so like I'm happy that I was born. Um, and then there's the question of, is the world going to, for a variety of reasons, going to keep getting substantially worse? However, I have a great aunt. She's like 90 years old. She's been saying she's never had kids. And she's been saying this since I was a small child. Like, I would never have kids, not in the state of the world it's in now. And she was saying that like in 1995, in 2000, in 2005. She's still probably saying it now. But I think about her a lot and her decision not to have kids.
Yeah, but I mean, it is that idea or that thought, like most people who have existed on this planet since human life was a thing have had like pretty shitty lives. If we think about like access to material resources, availability of free time to participate in culture, getting to live in a nice climate with good vegetation and agricultural capability and stuff like that. So sometimes I think about it with the analogy of like the Titanic. If I went back in a time machine to, does anyone know the year the Titanic set sail?
I want to 11 or 12, I think.
Sure. If I went back to 1911 or 12 and I had a child and it said, Papa, because we were in England and it talks like that, and it says it wants to sail to the Americas on the Titanic, but I'm from the future. There's a lot of stuff going on here with time travel, and I've seen the movie, so I know what happens. Am I going to buy my kid, probably named Oliver, a ticket on the damn Titanic? Like, if I'm pretty sure I know how this ends, so depending on your view of where the world's going and whether this be that you're terrified about the robots taking over and killing us all, or planet stuff, or political unrest, or just the overwhelming despair and anxiety of being a human consciousness stuck in this hellhole, do you want to put that on someone else? And that's something I struggle with. And I think the example you used, Alec, of that pioneer that sued their parents is really crucial there. That it's making such a big decision that you don't really have to bear with the responsibility of, unless your kid is like a Menendez brother and kills you one day.
I think a good compromise is just like have one kid, because then there's half as many humans as there were before.
So you support the one child policy of China, Alec?
I don't want it to be a policy. I'm just saying like
a guideline.
I could split the difference of like there's too many humans on Earth right now, and just be like, I'll have one. That is, when me and the person that I have this child with leave the Earth, there will be half as many of us after that, and yeah, that's like the middle ground, right? Like I'm not quite sure about either of these arguments, so like split the difference. And yeah, I don't want a one child. That's mean. You shouldn't. The one child policy is bad.
But you said it on the podcast just now, so I don't know what's happening. No,
what about adoption?
Well, yeah. So I think
that's another thing. No one talks about this.
Have one kid and adopt like 5 if you want to be like the Duggars or something. Like the other thing is my genetic material isn't good enough to warrant me. Like it's not like I have these great genes that like, my kid's gonna have like all sorts of like fucked up back problems, probably heart problems. God knows what's on like the other side of this genetic lineage. And so I really feel like it's just giving the kid a really shitty deck of cards.
Don't say that about yourself.
Here's your shit future and the world that we've created. Also, you have bad health.
Yeah, when the world becomes Mad Max and you have to fight for your basic existence, you'll have chronic back pain that precludes you from fighting to live.
Yeah. And of course, the flip side of all of this is that there are people out there with a heavy moral imperative to be fruitful and multiply in extreme ways. And there are a lot of like, and hey, if this is your journey, I don't disrespect it that much. But if you're like I'm talking real far right evangelical, like real into it stuff, a lot of people of that, if that's the cut of their jib, if that's the phrase we use here, are out here having tons of kids and thinking that there's a religious imperative to reproduce a lot. And if we want a fun, diverse society, the risk is if only one type of person are having lots of kids and all the like co-op member people that went to liberal arts colleges and ride their bicycles stop having kids, then we're not going to have a diverse and fruitful society.
Yeah, but all right, we can leave it there.
Yeah.
I was going
to say it. We can always
I was just going to say like, you don't have to worry about the state of society if you just opted out by not having kids. But anyway, I don't believe that. That's real dark, and I don't support what I just said.
Well, I promise if I ever do have a child, I'll bring it on here and I'll just hold it, and anyone on the live stream can look at it.
Okay.
No, actually, no, I don't want to do that. I think it's weird when people post their kid on social media all the time and make Instagram accounts for their kids. This isn't related to the topic, but I think that's a bit much.
Yeah. Anyway, I think it's time to get into the mailbag. We had some technical difficulties, so I don't think we can play any voicemails today. Is that accurate?
We do not have voicemail capacity, but we do have a lot of mail that I can read.
Yeah, and if someone wants to leave a voicemail for next week when we're not having technical difficulties, how can they do that, Michael Burns?
Oh, there's one main way. You want to get on your phone, you want to dial 1-213-534-8807. I'll say that again, 1-213-534-8807. If you're around the world, there's a bunch of ways online these days to call an American number for free or cheap, so get involved, right? And then you can email us at culturebinge@wisecrack.co. Note there is no M, wisecrack.co.
And before we get into the emails that you're going to so generously read for us, I do want to give a shout out to everyone who donated. Craig Locklear, Dude Abides, as always.
Yeah.
He says, kind of afraid to have kids due to my genetics. Got alcoholism on one side and depression on another. Hence why I like being an uncle instead.
Oh, he must be Irish.
I feel you, man. And also, much earlier, Matt Waters, who has a Deus Ex avatar, so good job, donated and said, I've seen Black Triangle Craft, TR-3B, as well as Jin Dancing Lights, all in one night above Pacific Northwest, USA. Would love to chat about it.
Nice. I like mushrooms too.
Oh, no.
Well, and along with that, can I just quickly shout out my buddy Esteban, who I met at a bar in LA last week, who came up and I guess recognized my face or voice from Wisecrack stuff, said he was just listening to Culture Binge, with his partner, I forget her name. She was very nice. They love the podcast. They were very big fans of Wisecrack in general. He bought me a beer. Just great people. So awesome to meet people that appreciate all of this in the real world.
Yeah. Thanks, Esteban, for buying Mike Burns beer. Now he's like, I love this podcast. I want to do it every week.
Yeah. And I'm just saying, find me, buy me beer. Let's get into these emails, right?
Yeah.
Okay, first is from Anonymous. I'd like to comment about the Culture Binge episode 16, a little unsure, where a theme of the discussion was food delivery and agents who deliver them. To further the narrative, I think it is a representation of the evolution of entitlement in our generations, as well as our need for hyper-productivity. The evolution from drive-thrus to weekly delivery to immediate delivery to accessing services online such as Netflix or Hulu, for example. Beyond just laziness and impatience, it represents a culture of workaholism too. It's almost a service-based form of Darwinism, where we change everything around us to adapt to how society functions. We as individuals rarely have time to spare for things like commuting, shopping, buying, and waiting. And this evolution of service is also a representation of how fast-paced this society can get in the future and how much more entitled we can become, which is extremely sad. What do you think? I'd just like to say I love your podcast, and it has inspired me to create a blog of my own. For this next part, I just want to note that I'm not making this up. And I love Michael's insights as much as everyone else's, and would even love a 4-people podcast. Cheers.
Thank you so much, Anonymous. They had their name in there, but they wanted it removed, so I did that. And I don't even remember it. Yeah, I think a lot of delivery culture has to do with I have to work 12 hours a day and I can't take a break, so I need someone to hand me a burrito that I will sadly eat while working on a script for 12 hours.
Yeah, I think they're absolutely spot on that our culture is adapting itself to hyperproductivity and the idea that we should always be laboring and producing value, and that things that aren't immediately productive should be reduced and streamlined. It's sad and scary.
I agree. I think we have this convenience culture where we're all looking for ways to save ourselves time, energy, effort, and food delivery fits in really well.
Before we get on the next email, thank you, Claudia Bell, Thanks for donating. I don't recognize what currency that is, but it doesn't matter. It's the thought that counts.
Has anyone ever donated? Can they donate Bitcoin on there?
I don't know. Whatever it is. I mean, maybe this person donated the equivalent of $5 million or 5 cents, but I'm just really happy that they like it enough to give any of their money. What's next?
Cool. So we got one from Sam. Dear Culture Binge, first off, thank you for making so much amazing content on Wisecrack and the various podcasts. I actually only just discovered Culture Binge, and I'm pleased I've got a lot of episodes to indulge on. I just finished your podcast titled Mindfulness. Is it a scam? And had a couple of thoughts on it. I worked for 4 months as an emergency room doctor in a busy London hospital, and let me tell you, without mindfulness, I might not have finished it. The hours are long, demanding, and almost always thankless. But thanks to regular mindfulness sessions every evening and a couple of deep breaths whenever I encounter a patient that made me want to blow my brains out, I made it. Sometimes I even enjoyed it. I feel like a lot of people are working in systems like me where it's always going to be shit. You can make it better via unions, pay rises, and better working conditions, but in the end, working in the emergency room is always going to be hard. That's ingrained in the nature of it. I imagine a lot of other jobs out there are the same. And in general, life is going to be hard. If you lose a loved one, get fired from your job, or deal with mental or physical health problems, there isn't a life HR person you can talk to discuss better living conditions. Of course, mindfulness isn't going to change a shitty situation, but in those cases, I think it can help ease that ugly knot in your stomach, even just for a while you regroup and try to recover. To quote Jerry from Rick and Morty, life is effort and I'll stop when I die. Sometimes to keep going like Jerry does, you gotta take a few deep breaths. Thanks for all the amazing content, Sam G.
It's worth noting that Serby was huffing a candle before coming on the podcast. Just really like, yeah, there it is. There it is.
I saw that and thought it was maybe like a drug thing.
Poppers. Yeah. No.
Yeah.
I think this email is really interesting because I think it, like, especially emergency room doctors get to the thing of, on one end, even if you're an emergency room doctor for like 5 hours a day, which is, a pretty short work day, it's going to be fucking rough because emergency rooms are super rough. But I know, and I'm not too familiar, but there's like a lot of conversations about med school and like how rotations work and scheduling doctors work, where I forget the exact hours, but I don't know if it's a 16-hour shift or a 24-hour shift, but essentially these like very, very arduous things that forever doctors just been like, it's the way it is. We got to work these long hours and not get enough sleep and like sleep in a closet and do all this shit. And some younger doctors are like, but do we, like, isn't there a way that we could do this that isn't? But even like if all that was addressed, doctors in the emergency room in the best working conditions would still probably need to huff a candle like Serby probably a few times a day.
Yeah. I mean, I like that he brings up, union and labor laws and even thinking about like automation and stuff like that. Because we can imagine this future where we work 3 days a week in jobs that aren't stressful and so much labor is automated. But like we're still going to need emergency room doctors and mental health counselors and social workers and people that are going to want to do extremely stressful things. So I think he's right. That's a really good point.
I see mindfulness and then other coping mechanisms as a way to add to your toolbox, like tool set. Like we exercise so this way we have strong backs or healthy hearts or whatever. We go to a doctor so we can get prescribed medication that causes lymphoma. Like why wouldn't we also do something that like helps us handle other challenges that maybe there is no prescription for? I mean, unless you want antidepressants, but maybe it's just like, I need to huff a candle so this way it like helps me control breathing. Or I don't know, I that's how I see mindfulness. It's a way to take a moment for yourself and to help yourself and to take deep breaths like our writer mentioned.
One more shout out. We're just getting cool donations and cool currencies. I've heard of the countries. I just haven't heard the currencies. But Nathan, who says I'm the hype, and then in parentheses Indian currency. I don't know. Whatever. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Do we have one more email?
We do. And I think I'll say the name right. And apologies so much if I don't. You're great and I'm an idiot. Email from Demian. Demian. I'm sorry, I'm dumb. I have a stupid name. Your name's great. Hey, you guys. I'm old enough to have witnessed mindfulness come and go out of fashion at least a couple times, and I was probably somewhat younger than you guys the last time I remember it getting some real mainstream attention. I think you're right to be skeptical of the pop culture version of meditation it's largely become. There is indeed what I consider a very problematic loss of context of the larger cultural factors behind mindfulness. In terms of the history of the practice, as you guys alluded to, mindfulness largely stems from things like Buddhism and Zen practice, also aesthetic forms of Hinduism, which I don't know a lot about. In those traditions, especially Zen, it's hard to overstate how pessimistic the worldview is. Life is essentially viewed as suffering on a fundamental level. Meditation isn't seen as a way to make life better. It's seen as a way to systematically remove yourself from the situation, both in the present and quite literally in the future, in the form of cessation from the cycle of life and rebirth through reincarnation, nirvana. The idea that there's some half measure that can somehow give us the best of both worlds is seen as essentially wrong-minded. There are some Zen masters who view mindfulness as a doorway to deeper points of view from the materialistic West, such as Thich Nhat Hanh, but I'm sorry for mispronouncing that, but even he would agree that it's only a first step. Meditation isn't supposed to be relaxing. It's supposed to lead to some very powerful and very painful realizations about the most fundamental aspects of our existence. If it's feeling great all the time, you're doing it wrong. In fact, there's a warning in these traditions about the false sense of well-being that one can often acquire after having practiced meditation for a decent amount of time. This is often seen as a very dangerous crossroads, as one can easily become enchanted by what are seen as essentially temporary side effects of practicing. A trap. The hard work has only just started. In Buddhist mythology, there are two states that are seen as extremely problematic: the state of extreme want and suffering, and the state of extreme self-contentment and luxury. Both are very difficult to escape. The only way forward is through awakened effort. Thanks for reading, Demian.
Yeah. Life is suffering. Don't have kids. No, I know I really like this email. I think it put a lot of good sort of, I mean, I learned a lot about mindfulness because I am mostly aware of how it works in like Americanized circles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was, and I think it says something about like the metaphysical backdrop upon which we're projecting mindfulness. Is it in a world that's devoid of meaning or purpose, or are we doing it to reinvigorate a meaning and purpose that we think is inherent in reality? I kind of like that take.
Cool. Well, I think that's all we have for today, everyone. Make sure to follow all of our wonderful hosts. You don't have to follow me. Surby is
follow Alec.
No, well, at Suri Patel on Twitter. Is that right?
Suri Patel 22.
Suri Patel 22. And Michael's is?
Michael O. Burns.
And I'm Wisecrack Alec because I wanted to make it easy for everyone. We'll see you again next week. Thank you so much for joining, especially our live stream listeners, our patrons. We love you all, but we also love the people who are just listening on RSS in a few days. You guys are cool too.
Yeah. And thanks to Mick. That was so fun.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was amazing.
Yeah. All right. See everyone next week.